Everyone in the palace knew the crown prince loathed children born to concubines above all else. Even the hounds guarding the eastern palace gates had to be sired by a legal primary wife. But my younger half-sister refused to heed the warnings and set out to seduce the crown prince. At that moment, I hid under the bed and watched him fly into a towering rage, vowing to carve her body into 8 pieces. Terrified out of her wits, she blurted out the truth in a desperate bid to save herself. That I, his crown princess, was also born of a concubine. And so the crown prince wept for 3 whole days and nights. He dug out my clan's genealogy scroll and rewrote it, naming me the ancestral matriarch of my entire house. I am the crown princess, born to a humble common household in the capital. The streets are packed with high-ranking officials. If Pangelian had lived here and carelessly dropped a bamboo pole, it would knock over dozens of men with higher rank than my own father. By all rights, the position of crown princess should never have fallen to me. Yet the emperor took a great liking to me and insisted I wed the crown prince. Before the imperial throne, the crown prince could only glare at me from behind his majesty's back, powerless to object. Palace servants all whispered that though he'd been forced into this marriage, he treated me kindly on the surface. For instance, once I mentioned craving winter peaches, he dispatched skilled horticulturists from across the realm to develop a breed that bore fruit in the cold months. The reality was far less romantic. He dragged in a sack full of yellow pears, dumped them on the table, and claimed these were winter peaches they'd mutated from the unseasonable soil and water. He explained, he truly thought I was a fool. Still, bound by etiquette, I dared not strike him. I had to take a bite and heap praise on his efforts. I lifted a pear, chewed slowly, and forced a smile ready to speak. Before I could utter a word, the crown prince mistook my raised hand for an incoming blow and instinctively threw his arms over his head to shield himself. Guards, protect the crown prince. Scores of palace guards burst into the chamber. Dozens of confused eyes fixed on me mid-bite of pear. The crown prince slowly lowered his tense arms, his face blazing crimson. He cleared his throat awkwardly. If circumstances permit, could we keep a few of them with us for our wedding chamber tonight? I nearly spat the pear flesh straight out of my mouth. I burned with indignant humiliation. No wonder such an enviable marriage had landed in my lap. The crown prince was clearly deranged. Furious as I was, I could do nothing but seethe silently. Without a powerful maternal clan backing me, I dared not stir up trouble in the Eastern Palace. To understand this ill-matched union, we must return to how it came to be 1 year prior. The emperor had grown weary of the crown prince's unruly arrogance. As the legitimate heir born to the empress, he bullied his half-brothers and half-sisters relentlessly, and worse still, spoke disrespectfully to both the throne and his court officials. In short, something had to be done to curb his temper. I shall find a capable crown princess to reign in his wild spirit. The emperor resolved. After much deliberation, he settled on me. His judgment was sharp. I will admit, though I lacked noble lineage, I was the first woman in our dynasty to claim the title of martial top scholar. Judging solely by skill, I could defeat the crown prince even with one hand tied behind my back. On our wedding night, the crown prince sought to assert his authority. He hovered beside me like a skittish quail and rattled off a long list of household rules, stealing glances at my expression all the while. The slightest furrow of my brow would prompt him to laugh and say, "Just a jest. No need to take this one seriously." But the endless wedding rituals left me utterly exhausted, my brows drawn tight without a moment's reprieve. And so he spent our entire wedding night standing beside my bed, cracking one joke after another to soften the rules. The next morning, we journeyed to the palace to pay respects to the emperor and empress. The empress watched the two of us for a long while with a warm, affectionate smile, then leaned close to the emperor's ear and chattered loudly enough for all to hear. "Your Majesty, look at the dark bruise beneath our son's eye. Clearly the young couple wore themselves to exhaustion last night." The emperor stroked his beard, wearing a smug grin. Indeed, I knew the martial top scholar would have stamina enough for 7 rounds in a single night. Every palace maid and eunuch clamped a hand over their mouth to stifle giggles. I burned with mortification. Were they really discussing such lewd matters right in Fr. ONT of me, bound by the duties of a new bride? I could not interject. I shot the crown prince a pointed glance, signaling him to step forward and quiet his parents' teasing. Yet I rolled my eyes until they ached, and he stared back blankly, oblivious to my hints. He even walked over to stand before me, wide-eyed and innocent. "Crown princess, why are your eyes twitching?" I surrendered, abandoning all silent gestures. Seeing the crown prince show such concern for me, the emperor and empress looked thoroughly pleased. From that day onward, rumors spread throughout the capital of the crown prince and I being inseparable, spending every night wrapped in each other's arms. Yet timeless tales of deep affection inevitably stir jealousy in malicious hearts. Barely half a year after our wedding, noble consort Shu claimed she had a young niece of unparalleled beauty and wit. She whispered in the emperor's ear night after night, begging to send the girl to the Eastern Palace as a companion for the crown prince. In the main hall, I stared at the gaunt, haggard girl standing before me, who looked as though she'd just been dug out of mud, lost in thought. First, noble consort Shu was a shameless exaggerator. Second, this was none other than my delicate half-sister Winsuegwa. I'd never guessed her aunt held such high rank in the palace. She'd hidden her connections masterfully. I smiled and waved at her as I always had. She pretended not to see me, stepping back as far as 3 paces to avoid contact. My outstretched hand hung suspended midair. Flustered, I gestured toward the distant scenery to fabricate idle chatter. "Suegwa, look, the 3 old trees have grown taller again." Shame and irritation flashed across her face. "I told you not to address me by my given name in front of strangers." I smiled gently. "Very well." Suegwa. Her anger flared, her slender willow-like eyebrows shooting upward. Only after repeated urging from her maid did she grudgingly bow to greet me. "Suegwa greets the crown princess." Before I could bid her rise, she lurched as though jolted by electricity, tripping over her own feet and scrambling away unsteadily. It was only a name. Was there truly so much shame attached to it? I thought little of her outburst, until the crown prince arrived. He blinked his starry eyes, and the first words out of his mouth called me by my childhood name. "Sue Hua. What shall we eat today?" I froze completely, glancing around at the maids hiding their laughter behind their sleeves. I finally understood how frustrating it was to listen to others speak lightly of your troubles. I ground my teeth. "Your Highness, cease using my given name. Address me simply as Crown Princess." He nodded obediently. "Understood." "Sue Hua. So what is for our meal?" Seething, I quickly shifted the subject. "Set that aside for now. Noble consort Shu's niece has arrived. How do you wish to arrange her lodgings?" The moment when Suegwa's name left my lips, the crown prince's head eunuch leaned in to whisper something in his ear. A switch seemed to flip inside him. Revulsion flooded his features as he rambled frantically. "What? She is a concubine's daughter. Damn it. I am violently allergic to those born of concubines. Can we dump her to live in the West chicken coop? Heaven forbid if her sleeve so much as brushes mine. I'll break into a wild dance of rage. Mark my words." Silence fell over the room. The maids held their breath. Even the ancient rustling autumn tree outside dared not stir a single leaf. It must have feared being chopped down for sharing the tainted label off Concubine-Born. I stared at his dark, bitter expression, utterly at a loss. A stray thought crossed my mind. Had my unlucky fate cursed him into this fit of madness? Truth be told, my fate was notoriously harsh. Before my betrothal to the crown prince, every suitor my father arranged for me met misfortune, some suddenly stricken with impotence, others crippled by broken legs, and not the ordinary kind. The imperial astronomer had studied our birth charts and sworn to the emperor and empress that our match was auspicious before the emperor gave his approval. If the crown prince fell ill, the astronomer could shoulder all blame. Logically speaking, pulling myself back to the present, I calmed my temper and tried to reason with him. "Your Highness, those born to concubines are still human. They cannot choose the circumstances of their birth." The crown prince spun around, haughty disdain in his gaze. "Humph. Double concubine spawn. The mere sight of her makes my skin crawl." I blinked in confusion. "What do you mean by double concubine spawn?" His expression softened, and he explained patiently. "It is simple. Her own mother was also a concubine. making her a double concubine child. I tilted my head, perplexed. But does that not mean two negatives make a positive? He furrowed his brows and shouted in protest. There is no positive here. She is stained twice over with concubine blood. I fell silent. Clearly, having grown up surrounded by numerous half-siblings born to concubines, he hated them all without exception, and that hatred now extended to my half-sister. Before I could argue further, the Crown Prince issued an order to lock Wept in the chicken coop. I disapproved of his cruelty. I planned to treat her to fine food and lodging for a few days before sending her home. With noble consort Shu as her aunt, we needed to maintain polite appearances. Yet he suddenly clutched his head and moaned of a splitting headache, muttering non-stop, "It is all this wretched concubine girl's fault. She has brought misfortune upon me." I moved to soothe him first, sending servants to fetch the imperial physician to tend to his ailment. I pointed at his forehead to distract him. "Your Highness, look what is tucked behind both your ears." He blinked his large, glossy eyes at me, speaking shyly. "Hee, it is my head. Inside this small skull dwells nothing but thoughts of you. Sui Hua, your nails have grown long. Shall I trim them for you?" My smile cracked clean down the middle. Some troubles could never be solved with gentle words. Brute force was the only answer. While he leaned forward, absorbed in staring at my fingernails, I slipped my other hand behind his neck and knocked him unconscious with a single blow. After slinging the Crown Prince over my shoulders and carrying him back to the main bedchamber, every maid in the Eastern Palace shrank away from me, trembling. Their eyes seemed to say, "The Crown Princess has finally dropped her pretense of mild-mannered gentility." I ignored their stares, prioritizing the Crown Prince's well-being, and ordered them to summon the physician at once without explanation. Inside the chamber, the Crown Prince jolted awake with a shriek. "I am not ill. How dare you intrude? I am the legitimate Crown Prince. All of you lowly concubine-born physicians are forbidden to draw near me." He scrambled atop the table, terror etched deep into his features. As if the physicians come to heal him were assassins sent to take his life, he pointed at one handsome young physician, voice dripping with revulsion. "You especially, double concubine spawn. If you lay a single finger on me, I swear I shall drop dead on the spot." The poor physician froze, trapped between advancing and retreating, bowing repeatedly in distress. "Your Highness, do not speak so." This humble official is filled with fear. I stood in the doorway, watching the chaotic scene unfold, a heavy headache throbbing behind my temples. The Crown Prince truly reserved equal loathing for anyone born to a concubine, without discrimination. Seeing how unhinged he was, I ordered servants to bring platters of food, intending to sit with and comfort his delirious self. Upon the bed, the Crown Prince wrapped his arms around his torso, clad in a plain cyan robe, gazing pitifully at the servants. "Wu, where is the Crown Princess? I wish to report all of you to her." I stepped forward and patted his back softly, my tone gentle. "Your Highness, I am here." Yet the moment he laid eyes on me, his face lit up, arms thrown wide, his words wild and unrestrained. "Crown Princess, kiss me." My facial muscles twitched. I quickly stuffed a lotus pastry into his mouth to silence him. "It seems your fever has addled your wits completely." After receiving treatment, the Crown Prince remained delirious, rambling endlessly about the rigid hierarchy separating legitimate and concubine-born children. I dared not let Wept cross his path for fear of triggering another breakdown. Even respected physicians born to concubines sent him into fits of hypervigilance, as though he were a maiden guarding her chastity. If the double concubine Wept encountered him, he would surely fly into an explosive rage. To preserve my peaceful days ahead, I ordered maids to keep a tight watch over my half-sister, planning to send her away at the earliest opportunity. But misfortune follows when one's luck sours. 7 Drinking cold water burns your tongue. Somehow, Wept dug a large tunnel out from the corner of the chicken coop where she was confined and escaped. Staring at the dusty, disheveled girl standing before me, I briefly wondered who truly bore the title of Marshall Top Scholar. My delicate half-sister, or I, the Crown Princess who spent most of her days eating and napping. "Suegwa, what do you intend to do?" Her eyes burned with bold ambition, And her words shocked me to the core. 30 years east of the river. 30 years west of the river. Do not mock a young girl fallen on hard times. As long as the mountain stands, I shall cut you up for firewood. I stared blankly at her, unable to parse her cryptic threat. Yet her tone carried clear provocation. I raised my hands, loosening my clenched fists, and watched her calmly repeat that. In the space of a single breath, she stumbled backward 10 paces, waving her hands frantically to ward me off. I was satisfied by her reaction, even if she regarded me as a deadly flood or ferocious beast. Before my marriage, I'd spent every day practicing swordplay and martial arts at home, defeating countless rivals to claim the rank of martial top scholar. And what was the point of all that training, if not to command awe? There was unmatched joy in flaunting my strength and superiority before others. Humph. A concubine's daughter will always be a concubine's daughter, overestimating her own worth. The second the words left my mouth, I clapped a hand over my lips. Horrified. Disastrous. Utterly disastrous. The crown prince's obsession with legitimate blood had seeped into my mind, and I'd unwittingly parroted his cruel prejudice against concubine-born children. When Suegwa fixed me with a strange stare and retorted sharply, "But are you not also born of a concubine?" A jolt of realization hit me. I too was a concubine's daughter. My mother had failed to bear my father a son, so my grandmother forced him to demote his primary wife to the rank of concubine. Unable to bear the humiliation, she hanged herself the very next day. By all lineage rules, I was a genuine concubine-born girl. I'd simply run wild in my father's household growing up, challenging my grandmother and father to spar at the slightest disagreement. So no one in the manor ever treated me as lesser. I would have forgotten this truth entirely had when Suegwa not spoken up. While I mulled over her words, she mistook my silence for defeat and stepped forward, brimming with smug pride. "Dear elder sister, you've put on weight since entering the Eastern Palace. The crown prince would surely prefer my slender frame. Furthermore, I have noble consort Shu as my powerful aunt for support. Even if the crown prince takes no fancy to me now, he will seek to curry favor with my aunt eventually. When that day comes, what leverage will you have to compete against me?" I glanced down at my midsection. I had not gained weight at all. Still, there was truth to her words. That did not mean I would spare her a beating. However, I lifted the scrawny girl off the ground and landed 2 sharp smacks on her rear, drawing shrill wails from her. "Ah! How dare you strike me? Mark my words, I will steal the crown prince's heart from you. One day you shall kneel and hold my shoes for me." I shot her a dismissive glance and turned to leave, abandoning her to stamp her feet in unbridled fury. Returning to the Blue Lawn Hall, I sank into a daze before my bronze vanity mirror, when Suegwa's taunts had sown anxiety in my heart. Reflecting honestly, I possessed few outstanding merits beyond brute strength and a hearty appetite. Worst of all, I belonged to the very category the crown prince despised above all others: children born to concubines. The security of my position as crown princess hung precariously in the balance. After much deliberation, I resolved to test the crown prince's true feelings. That night, shrouded in pitch-black wind, an hour ripe for mischief and murder, the crown prince remained detained on palace business. While he was gone, I poked a small hole in the paper window of his main bedchamber. Spying was second nature to me. I'd once eavesdropped on my father's plotting at home. Back then, one of his concubines had urged him to poison his unruly eldest daughter. Every malicious word they whispered behind my back reached my ears clear as day. When my father carried a bowl of poison medicine to me, wearing a warm false smile and saying, "Eldest daughter, drink your tonic," I caught sight of the concubine gloating beside him. I accidentally lidded the bowl and poured the entire bitter concoction down her throat instead. It was only natural that when Suegwa bore resentment toward me. Shortly after, the crown prince's entourage returned in grand procession. I pressed my ear to the window hole, yet heard nothing. The bedchamber was far too vast. Once he stepped inside, my tiny peephole would be useless. With no other choice, I summoned his chief maid and head eunuch, my tone sickly sweet yet edged with threat. "Listen closely. When he enters the room, ask him what he thinks of when Suegwa." I will hide beneath the bed to listen. They hesitated. But one glimpse of my fist the size of a sandbag secured their instant compliance. I slipped under the crown prince's bed without a sound. Moments later, movement echoed throughout the chamber. I watched the crown prince fling himself heavily into a wooden chair, thick malice rolling off his frame in waves. Bring her in. Li Xiaozhu dragged Wensuigwa forward, bound tight as a twisted bundle of hemp rope. Clad in a plain white dress, her hair matted and face drained of color, she knelt crookedly on the stone floor, curious. I craned my neck to watch the pair. The crown prince's gaze dripped with scorn, his voice cold and biting. You lowly concubine-born girl, you dared disguise yourself as a ghost to frighten me. What matter if you are noble consort Shu's niece? Guards, carve her into 8 pieces at once. When Suigwa trembled violently, disbelief shining in her tearful eyes, she pleaded in a soft, delicate voice, Your Highness, I did no such thing. I only wished to dance for you. I thought to myself, draped in white with unbound hair, appearing unannounced in the dead of night to dance, even I would be chilled to the bone. Let alone the crown prince. The crown prince grew impatient and shot his eunuch a sharp glance. I care nothing for your motives. All of you born to concubines harbor wicked, self-serving schemes. You came here to destroy the bond between me and the crown princess. Li Xiaozhu. Drag her away at once. His eunuch twisted his hips and lifted his fingers into a delicate orchid gesture. As you command, Your Highness. At the mention of my name, when Suigwa's face twisted with resentment, she thrashed against her bindings and shouted recklessly, If Your Highness detests those born to concubines so deeply, then when Suihua is one too. Her mother was demoted from primary wife to concubinage, is tainted just as I am. She tilted her chin upward, overflowing with hurt and injustice. We share the same fate as concubine-born children. How can you show such blatant favoritism? Silence crashed over the room. The crown prince's features froze in utter shock. He clapped his hands over his ears, his lips trembling. Impossible. You are slandering her. Having nothing left to lose, when Suigwa spoke with unrestrained fury, Your Highness, ask my father, and he shall confirm every word I say. Half an hour later, my father was summoned to the palace. As the terrible secret laid bare, a bitter ache welled up in my chest, ready to surrender to despair. But the crown prince broke down into tears first. Woo! I cannot bear the thought of my crown princess being a concubine's daughter. All of you, get out. Leave me this instant. At his command. My father and Wensuigwa scrambled to their feet and fled headlong. I silently crawled out from under the bed, pretending I had witnessed nothing, lifting my skirts to rush for the door. Stop. The crown prince's eyes were swollen red from weeping. The robust, powerful air I knew swayed unsteadily, like a lonely hound abandoned by its master. He bit his lower lip, staring at me as though I were a faithless lover, ready to crumble to pieces if I stepped through the threshold. I had no choice but to stay and comfort his shattered heart. I soothed him for 3 full days and nights, yet his tears flowed without cease, as though possessed by a water spirit. To make matters worse, when the maids brought meals to his bedside, he sobbed and refused to touch a bite. This spelled disaster. If the crown prince refused food, how could I eat? The answer was plain. I could not. I could endure crying alongside him, but starvation was far beyond my endurance. Your Highness. I knelt before him, my features etched with agony. This fate was never my desire. If you cannot accept the truth, issue an edict to cast me aside as your crown princess. O crown prince, I am starving to death. If I linger here any longer, I fear I shall sink my teeth into your flesh. Show mercy and set me free. At my words, his handsome face contorted with raw emotion. I could not fathom the storm of turmoil raging within him. Yet he quickly reached down to pull me to my feet, his bloodshot eyes locked firmly onto mine. I would sooner die than repudiate you. This was the first time he had spoken to me with such unyielding resolve in all our months of marriage. Not only did they retrieve the ceremonial sword he ha de longs and stored away and dragged me outside by the hand. Watching him in this unrecognizable state, I recalled the tales others told of his unbridled arrogance before our marriage. I had never witnessed that wild, unrestrained version of him myself. Junyan had always treated me with profound respect. Shortly after our wedding, I had lived by strict rules and never stirred up trouble. I knew he did not truly fear me. He had merely reined in his temper for my sake. But at that moment, hunger gnawed at my insides relentlessly. I fought back tears. "Your Highness, where are we going?" He answered simply, "First, we shall dine." Those 3 words sounded sweeter than celestial music, instantly lifting my despair. After finally drinking a bowl of congee, I yearned to close my eyes and sleep soundly. The Crown Prince sat beside me, polishing his sword blade non-stop. My eyes shot wide open, and I shrank back nervously. "Your Highness, what do you intend to do with that sword?" A soft tenderness flickered across his gaze. "You have suffered unjust harm, Sui Hua. Today I shall march to the Wen Manor and demand justice for you." My heart swelled with gratitude. I thought he planned to pressure my father to restore my mother's formal status as primary wife. I never imagined what he would actually do. He stormed to my family's estate and lit the Wen ancestral shrine clean in 2 with a single sword strike. Staring at the shattered stone tablets of our forefathers, my grandmother collapsed to the ground and wailed, "You ungrateful girl who climbed high through marriage. You held no regard for me while living at home. And now you bring ruin upon our clan after wedding into the palace. You are every bit as insolent as your worthless mother, empty-headed and quick to defy your elders." I could never understand why all blame for failing to bear sons fell upon my mother alone. Nor could I comprehend why my grandmother rolled and threw tantrums before me after the Crown Prince split tea. He shrine, as if the weak were inherently guilty by virtue of their misfortune. But, grandmother, I am no soft clay to be trampled upon. I endured countless hardships, begged for favors from strangers, and trained through sweltering summers and freezing winters to master martial arts, all so I would never again be bullied by those who twist right and wrong to suit their greed. I wore a cold, hollow smile. "Grandmother, such harsh words are ill-suited for our conversation. If you insist on speaking them, we may spar as we once did in the manor. Would you care to test your strength against mine?" Watching me advance step by step, her face drained of all color, she scrambled to stand, and a sharp crack echoed as her waist snapped out of alignment. Writhing in blinding pain, tear-blurred, servants hurried to prop her up on a stone bench. Even in agony, she did not forget to scold my father. "When Chunju, ugh, the agony. Look at the daughter you raised, sent to the countryside for years, only to return a violent bandit. What sin did I commit to deserve this?" Her tone blended bitter sorrow and furious disappointment. "Chunju, hurry and make her persuade the Crown Prince to undo this madness. Are you such a useless father that you cannot discipline a mere girl?" Publicly reprimanded before all the household servants, my father burned with embarrassment. His face darkened as he turned to scold me. "Eldest daughter, how could you indulge your husband in disgracing your maternal family? Have you cast all rights and filial piety to the dogs?" A cold sneer curled my lips, ready to fire back a retort until I spotted the Crown Prince jogging toward us from the east courtyard. Grinning triumphantly, I swallowed my anger, unwilling to curse in front of him, and feigned calm composure. The Crown Prince carried himself like a victorious general fresh from the battlefield, his voice bright with excitement. "Sui Hua, guess what I have found." I shook my head to signal I could not guess. He giggled and held up a rolled scroll. "Your clan's genealogy." I struck out the names of every other Wen clansman, leaving only yours written upon the scroll. "You shall no longer be known as a concubine's daughter." I stared in shock. "Then what am I?" He spoke proudly, eager to claim credit for his deed. "The ancestral matriarch of the Wen line. Grandmother. Father." Grandmother's face flushed bright scarlet, while my father's turned sickly green. The pair of them made quite a striking redand green sight. Naturally, word of this absurd act spread quickly, and the emperor summoned us both to the palace at once. So many people had submitted formal complaints that when Suegwa, backed by noble consort Shu, had to queue behind my father and grandmother to voice her grievances. My father stood before the throne, sniveling and weeping bitterly. "All memorial tablets of my ancestors are destroyed. What purpose is there left in my life?" The Crown Prince replied coldly. "Then you may die." My father choked on his words, trapped mid-sentence with nowhere to turn. Next. Grandmother took her turn to plead her case. She trembled from head to toe, regarding the crown prince as a bloodthirsty monster, kowtowing repeatedly before the emperor. Your Majesty, you must deliver justice for this humble old woman. What lunacy exists under heaven such as this? The emperor and empress exchanged a glance. The empress rose to her feet, stepped forward, and helped grandmother stand, her voice gentle and soothing. You are advanced in years. Prolonged kneeling will harm your health. Come rest in my palace chambers first. As she spoke, she shot 2 palace ladies-in-waiting a subtle signal. The women smiled and stepped forward to lead grandmother away, daring not defy the empress. Grandmother's eyes darted toward my father, clinging to the hope he would defend her. Yet he failed her utterly, crushed beneath the crown prince's unyielding aura and the emperor's ambiguous neutrality. He surrendered completely. At the end of the day, my father was merely a 6th-rank civil official. Without my marriage to the crown prince, he would never have set foot inside the palace gates. At the very least, restore my name to the scroll, he stammered, his face burning red yet his voice lacking all conviction. The emperor cleared his throat to calm him. That shall be arranged. Rest assured. Minister 1. Return to your manor for now. I shall settle this matter properly. Once my father departed, the emperor massaged his aching temples and turned to noble consort Shu and Wensuigwa, demanding an explanation from the crown prince, with no outsiders present. Junyan spoke his heart freely. I refuse to accept this concubine-born girl. You claimed she would stay briefly to keep the crown princess company. Yet she dared to scheme to seduce Meshemla's creature. When Suegua's face blanched pale as paper, while the emperor's darkened with anger. A stark contrast of black and white. I knew her supposed short visit had been a thinly veiled plot to secure permanent residence in the Eastern Palace, though the crown prince appeared blind to her ulterior motives. Having finished speaking, he winked at me playfully, eager to demonstrate his unwavering loyalty. The emperor grew cross upon hearing his words. You cannot abide girls born to concubines. Yet the crown princess herself shares that fate. How do you reconcile this double standard? The crown prince's tone remained calm. I was unaware of her lineage at first. Yet after marrying her, every thought in my heart belongs solely to her. No divide between legitimate and concubine-born blood could ever tear us apart. The emperor fell silent, noticing noble consort Shu's rigid, strained expression. He moved to mediate. You see, it is not I who refuse your request. Our son has made his own resolve clear. Very well, noble consort Shu. Adopt her as your legal daughter, and I shall find a worthy husband for her in due time. Noble consort Shu shook her head, forcing a frail smile. I thank your majesty for your kindness. Yet Princess Xian would surely grow resentful, with an elder sister holding the title of crown princess. Her future prospects shall remain bright. I shall personally seek out a suitable match for the girl. Princess Xian was noble consort Shu's only daughter, a spoiled, willful young lady. With her objection looming, the emperor abandoned the proposal entirely. When Suegwa left the palace with nothing to show for her plotting, her reputation tarnished irreparably. She ground her silver teeth to powder, glaring at me with venomous resentment. I grinned and drew a finger across my throat in a playful threatening gesture, recalling the years of terror I'd inflicted upon her. She ducked her head in fright at once. My father's name was restored to the clan scroll but written beneath my own. From that day forward, I was officially his ancestral matriarch, though he refused to acknowledge it. The government clerks and clan elders upheld the written record, leaving him with no recourse. Never again could he scold or discipline me, unless he wished to commit sacrilege against his own forebears. Upon hearing the news, grandmother fell gravely ill. She had rushed to the palace while her waist injury remained untreated, worsening the damage until her lower body was completely paralyzed, confined to her bed for the remainder of her life. Though grandmother lay bedridden, my father remained hale and hearty. Now that I was technically his ancestor, could I possibly let him off easy? Absolutely not. I ordered servants to keep constant watch over him, commanding him to kneel before my mother's spirit tablet for 5 full hours each day. He had no morning court duties to attend, so he could remain there from dawn till dusk with no one the wiser. Word reached me that my father drowned in bitter regret for fathering me. Regret for marrying my mother. He cursed my name endlessly each day. It mattered little to me. Soon enough, he would lack the strength to hurl insults. I never expected faithless men to reform their ways. A life of endless torment was the just fate they deserved. I had once imagined my vengeance unfolding years later. Once I ascended to the rank of empress. Yet Junyan's unshakable devotion far exceeded every hope I held. After a long day of state affairs, he returned to the eastern palace and collapsed with his head resting on my thighs. Sui Hua, I am famished. What shall we dine on tonight? Watching his pleading eyes, I held up a silver armband the size of an infant's forearm. Shall I feed you this? He blushed shyly and pressed a light kiss to my palm. I caught his wandering hand and tilted my head. Curious. Do you truly bear no resentment toward me for being born to a concubine? Junyan blinked his innocent large eyes. I resented it fiercely. At first the sky felt as though it had crumbled to the ground. Yet I had no choice. Losing you would be far worse than accepting this truth. Besides, I rewrote the clan scroll to name you ancestral matriarch. You are no longer marked as a concubine's daughter. And your mother's grave may be relocated away from the one clan burial ground. I nodded without speaking. He quickly added a soft reassurance. Even if your lineage remained unchanged, I would not love you less. My hatred is only for those palace schemers who whisper malicious gossip behind others' backs. I understood perfectly. Just as I loathed faithless, heartless men, he despised those born to concubiness who had both suffered deep wounds at their hands. At last, the storm had passed, and we could walk forward toward a peaceful future together. Extra side story: I am Junyan. Today at the palace, I crossed paths with that wicked girl who sought to destroy my bond with the crown princess. Her eyes glistened with fake tears as she laid false accusations against Sui Hua, claiming she had acted cruelly at home, beating her 80-year-old grandmother, berating 5-year-old children. I nearly laughed aloud. Did she forget I am infamous throughout the palace for speaking sharply to the emperor and snapping at all my court officials? I still remember the final round of the martial top scholar examinations years ago. I sat upon the viewing dais and watched her fight match after match, wounded time and again yet rising to her feet without surrender. From that moment, I knew she and I were cut from the same cloth, unbreakable in adversity, destined to carve out our own paths in life. I had never imagined father would betroth her to me as my crown princess. She shows me formal respect on the surface, yet beneath it all, she fears me not in the slightest, treating me as her only true confidant. The first time I acted foolishly and stirred up trouble, she never scolded me, instead quietly mopping up every mess I left behind. I began observing her endlessly after that. She rises at dawn to practice martial arts, craves peaches yet detests grapes. On rainy days, she lingers by the window, lost in thought as though mourning someone lost to her. Her body bears countless scars, only the ones visible to my eyes. I dare not imagine how many more she hides beneath her clothing, terrified of inflicting new wounds upon her. I tamed my wild temper and reined in my reckless behavior. Sui Hua is a woman brimming with unshakable confidence and charm. That is why I detest when Quigua, not merely for being born to a concubine, but because her appearance stirred crippling anxiety within Sui Hua's heart. My sole purpose is to shield Sui Hua from all harm, to ensure no pain ever touches her again. Noble consort Shu is not your blood aunt, is she? You are nothing more than a disposable pawn to her, cast aside without a second thought. You set your sights on me instead, yet you have misjudged your mark. I glanced at Li Xiaoshu and asked coolly, what punishment is due for one who dares to insult the crown prince? Li Xiaoshu lifted his fingers into his delicate orchid gesture once more. A grave offense indeed. Your Highness's noble personage demands justice. She ought to receive 20 heavy cane strokes before being exiled to the palace of servants. I nodded in satisfaction. Carry out this sentence at once. When Sui Hua stared at me in terror. Yet I had prepared for her tricks this time. Before she could struggle, servants clamped a cloth over her mouth and dragged her away. Elated, I hurried back to the eastern palace with a bright smile. Another hidden threat capable of hurting my crown princess had been eliminated. Truly, I am the perfect guardian for my beloved flower.